Thank you so much. Let me ask a first question, and then I'm going to defer to Congressman Alan West of Florida, and then we will probably, obviously, since there's two of us, we'll do a second round if necessary. But in Colorado, and this is maybe anecdotal, but in talking to the oil and gas companies, it seems that there's very limited interest in public lands at this point in time, and I think across this country, and I think the movement is to fee lands. And so when we see increased the reports of increased drilling or development in the United States, it seems to be off of public lands onto fee lands. And I wonder if, number one, is that true? And number two, how do you account for that? Why? I mean, I don't see any appetite whatsoever right now in terms of new development on public lands. Yeah, Mr. Barber.
It's a very good question, Mr. Chairman. Certainly, there is more quick opportunities and a smoother planning ability when state and fee lands minerals are pursued. In some areas, like the Powder River Basin, where I work, 2/3 of the minerals are owned by the Federal Government. So you really have to be in the federal mineral game in order to develop. One of the things that worries me is that in basins, in formations where porosity is high and minerals can flow, whether it's natural gas or oil, the federal mineral estate, because it's not being developed as quickly as the state and fee minerals, can actually change ownership by moving from one leasehold area across through a wellbore that's actually producing. So if I'm here in Section 1 with a federal lease that I'm waiting for a permit on, and surrounding me there are privately owned or state-owned minerals, those minerals, under the right geologic circumstances, can actually change hands. And so those minerals that could have been produced and paid royalties to the Federal Government and ultimately to the state are not produced, and that's very concerning. I wonder if the public in the U.S. knows that potentially their minerals may be produced up somebody else's wellbore.
Any other comments on that? Yes, Ms. Rodell.
I often see the overarching regulatory agencies and the uncertainties in which the smaller operators, the environment which the smaller operators are looking at and operating in, definitely turns them away from operating on federal lands. And although some of these federal lands are, they're 10-year terms, sometimes it takes us 8 years to get to even the process of submitting some APDs. Leases can be nominated, they can be paid for, and they cannot be issued. So there are times when we're waiting for leases to be issued, or we're going through some environmental, and again, I stress the environment is important to all of us, but we can have so many different layers. And currently we've got 11 federal agencies that are trying to take aim at the oil and gas companies. These oil and gas companies cannot plan in such an uncertain environment, and so they move to fee and state minerals because the process takes a fraction of the time. Although oftentimes the same parts of the operations are put in place, the permitting can take, it usually can take less than 30 to 60 days.
Okay. Mr. Squalacci.
Yes. I don't want to dismiss certainly the points that have been made about the problems with overregulation and the difficulties that some of the companies have been having. But it is important to keep in mind that natural gas is at an historically low price right now. The general counsel for one of the major companies told me recently that they are not even looking at gas plays at this point in time because of that low price. She told me that they can't make a profit on gas plays. And I think that is certainly having an effect on lower demand. Again, it's not the only thing that's going on. If you look in Wyoming, most of the plays are gas plays. There's interest up in the Niobrara because those are liquid hydrocarbon plays, and I think there's a lot more profit to be made in the liquid sector.
Okay. Mr. Ewing.
I'd like to comment on those remarks. My experience with Amoco for 15 years, number one, I would like to comment about the unitization. I fought that the entire time I was with Amoco. We spent millions and millions of dollars. We had a huge staff. We explored everywhere in Wyoming and in other states. Whenever you find a prospect area, you have to get seismic, you have to spend a lot of money putting the leases together and everything, and you get to a point where very quickly you're up to the 246,000 acres. And the only way that you're going to, once you buy that acreage, the only way you're going to get it off your books and make yourself legal is to form a unit. Now, when you form that unit, you're told you will drill wells by such and such a point in time. And if you don't, the unit will be terminated. So that's the manner in which people will go in, and the professor says they're bragging about how much acreage they hold. They've got obligations in every one of those units down there that you're talking about. As far as the fee versus federal, I ran smack into that. I mean, these guys, I had 50% of the well we drilled up in the Bighorn was people down in the Houston area that I brought into the prospect, and when they were still with me, when we were nominated those lands to drill a second well, when they found out that the BLM had pulled down those leases, they just all called and said, sorry, we're out. So in effect, I lost half of my investors at that point. And a small operator lives on what he has and the investors that he can bring in, because there aren't many small investors, operators who have the production wherewithal that will allow them to go out and take all the risk of the drilling themselves. So I want to make that point. I have a question myself. Will I have an opportunity to give you any testimony after the questioning is completed? I'd like to.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Let me do one more question, and I'll defer to Congressman West for some questions. And that is on these the deadlines that BLM has, and I think that Mr. Barber, you mentioned one specific deadline that was ignored. What are the most salient examples of deadlines that BLM has that they ignore and that hurt small operators?
I'm referring to this printout slide that says APD processing. What does the regulation say? When an operator comes into BLM with an application for permit to drill, the first thing they have to do is provide a $6,500 application fee. Keep in mind, this is an application fee. It is not refundable, and it does not guarantee a processing time or a permit. BLM is required by onshore order number 1 to follow these steps. Number 1, they have to post the APD for 30 days prior to a decision. I think that is typically met by most field offices. BLM has 10 days to notify the operator if the application is complete. Some offices meet that and some offices don't, but it's specifically required in the regulation. BLM then has 10 days to schedule an on-site inspection. That is rarely met in the offices that I work with. If deficiencies are identified, the operator has 45 days to respond to those deficiencies. Typically, those are met because the operator wants to keep the project going. And then once the deficiencies are addressed, if there are any, BLM has 30 days to reach a decision. That, in my experience, is almost never met currently. And when BLM doesn't meet these timeframes, stretches out the process. I talked earlier about when an operator has an issue with a BLM decision, they go to an appeal at a State Director Review, and that process was set up to deliver a quick answer from the State Office of BLM to the field office as to whether that field office's decision was correct or incorrect. Those are regularly now in Wyoming taking 90 days or far more, many times close to 9 months. And when an operator doesn't get an answer on that, not only A, are they sort of robbed of their due process, but B, BLM keeps making that decision over and over and over, and it causes actually more of those appeals to happen.
Okay. Ms. Rodell?
I agree with Mr. Barber. We understand that on-sites can't be scheduled until there's no snow on the ground. So in the West, and that's my primary area of operations, sometimes we do have to wait. However, I have seen the on-site process take over a year just to schedule an on-site. In addition, with regards to the 45-day deficiency response, I recently have run into that area where you do receive an official letter from the BLM. You respond to the deficiencies. However, I had 3 additional email deficiency responses come, all with very different deficiencies. These were not because the original deficiencies were not addressed. These were different deficiencies. And, you know, the consensus of the industry, of the oil and natural gas industry, these are just obstructionist moves to keep these permits locked up for years.